Hello everybody. Suffice it to say that we are together again under extraordinary circumstances. It would also be accurate to say that we are currently experiencing life under extraordinary circumstances. I use the words experiencing life as opposed to living life, because obviously we're living our lives, but I've also been experiencing certain aspects of everyday mundane but important happenings of life again for the first time in a long time. And I think that is not necessarily altogether a bad thing. Of course, the COVID-19 novel virus that caused this pandemic, and with it global chaos, is not a good thing. But I am, I think like many of you, inherently positive souls, and when one determines to look with the purpose of seeing, silver linings appear like faint holograms, inviting engagement. Many menial tasks that went by unnoticed in my household have, justifiably so due to the working from home thing, moved to the forefront and now receive the attention and appreciation that they deserve. My name is Hendrik van der Berg, General Manager, New Business Retentions at Profmed Medical Scheme, and thank you for joining me today. I express my sincere gratitude for the healthy, progressive working relationship that exists between Dentasa and Profmed every year, and I'm doing so again now. Typically, during our time together, I ensure that I cover as accurately as I can the primary factors that influence healthcare, and more specifically, healthcare funding in South Africa. I will do so again today. I will also attempt to cover the impact that this pandemic has had and will continue to have on our collective industry. When we consider the adverse effect that this virus had and will continue to have, it is impossible to do so in isolation. Everything is connected, correct? So I'll be covering the manner in which our government has responded. I again use the word attempt because although there is much more that we know now than what we did know back in January of this year, there is still much relating to the COVID-19 virus that we do not know. Hence the term novel virus. We have known about this virus for a while, but we have never experienced this virus in a human body before. And therefore, we effectively start out with zero clinical data. When you have zero data, understanding the impact is an extremely difficult and protracted process. Now, I understand that good presenters make use of hooks to keep the audiences interested. A said hook is designed specifically to make the presenter seem more intelligent and interesting than what they really are. A fact that my beautiful wife regularly reminds me about. So, here we go. Zero data equates to a total lack of knowledge. Now that is a very, very dangerous situation to be in. An example of a zero knowledge situation that lasted for a long, long time, back in the 1700s, is that the simple tomato was feared in Europe for more than 200 years. Imagine that. No progress with regards to better understanding in more than 200 years. A nickname for the fruit was the poison apple, because it was thought that aristocrats got sick, died after eating them. Of course, we know now that is not true, but remember they were in a total lack of knowledge situation. Wealthy Europeans used pewter plates, which were high in lead content. Because tomatoes are so high in acidity, when placed on this particular tableware, the fruit would leach lead from the plate, resulting in many deaths from lead poisoning. No one made the connection between plate and poison at the time. The tomato was ignorantly named as the culprit. I know, right? I was thinking exactly the same thing. Were these people a little bit slow? Or, it takes a number sometimes to make up a village, right? Okay, remember, we have the advantage of hindsight, and of course we live in a different time with much more knowledge, and our scientific processes relating to research, development, are far more advanced and robust. However, the common denominator between poisonous tomatoes and COVID-19 is evident. Zero clinical data and a lack of knowledge and understanding. The other very significant advantage we do have is we understand the human body now much better than what they did back in the 1700s. We have also had to deal with many epidemics and pandemics going back 5,000 plus years. Yep. 5,000 years ago, an epidemic completely wiped out a prehistoric village in, anybody like to take a guess? Correct. Your reward is in the mail. In China. The find is widely accepted by the archaeological community as the first documented, obviously after the fact, epidemic in the world. And I'm just thinking out loud here, but maybe somebody that speaks Mandarin, who is not Chinese, should vigorously suggest that these folks make some radical lifestyle adjustments. I mean, is it just me, or is there a recurring theme here? All right, moving along before I get into trouble. I will be revisiting the topics I covered at your 2019 summit. The Health Market Inquiry, we'll talk about their findings. The Health Market Inquiry covered the National Health Insurance, looked at the Medical Schemes Amendment Act. I will attempt to cover what has transpired in South Africa, across the globe as well, in the last 12 months or so, considering the elements that also influence our ability as a country to deal with, well, anything really. Government's drive towards NHI despite serious affordability realities. We'll talk about the SA economy, including the South African tax collection efforts yielding less and less. The base is narrowing, the tax base is decreasing. According to MoneyWeb, fewer than 3 million people in a country with a population of over 56 million people paid 97% of all personal income tax in the 2019 tax year. That's 5.3% of the population. Projections showed 2021, 60% of taxes collected in South Africa will be used to pay public service officials' salary. 60% of taxes go to approximately 2.5% of the population. So it's probably no wonder that taxpayers are seeking futures elsewhere. And meanwhile, criminal activity is increasing relentlessly. Unemployment numbers are much higher, published by the government, we all know that. State-owned enterprises and parastatals have been mismanaged. Corruption and looting continues unabated. Civil servants and friends and family members of said civil servants believe that it is their time to eat, leading to SOE and parastatal mismanagement, looting and flagrant thievery. Sad thing about all of this is the people affected the most by this appalling behavior, the so-called civil servants, are the people who keep voting the same way. I'm certain there is an oxymoron in there somewhere. South African civil servants actually serving the citizens. Okay, I will cover COVID-19 and the impact as far as we understand it at this stage. And then we'll attempt a change of mood and talk about tomorrow. What does that look like? I will again speak about how clever we all are at Profmed Medical Scheme and why you should seriously consider membership. If you attended the Dentasa Summit in 2019 and you were paying attention, then you would recognize the next batch of slides, and you might pick up some inconsistencies with regards to the layout, look and feel of the slides, but I've just taken them as they are so that we can use them as context and a premise for moving forward. All right, talk about the triangle of health reform, and I'd like to focus for a while on the NHI. And the only thing I can offer at this stage with regard to NHI is that the challenge that came along in dealing with this pandemic has confirmed the glaringly obvious shortcomings that exist in our public health service. Despite politicians repeatedly spouting nonsense, claiming that any bad news being reported is false and that the public service offering is serving the citizens with aplomb. The NHI slides that I used in 2019, guys, will be on the screen. I'm not going to be going through every single point again. I do, however, as a pretext, if you will, moving into our ability to deal with the current pandemic, touch on 3 or 4 major points. Okay, the first point was no one in the private sector is arguing that everything with regards to the public sector health offering needs to be revamped. Everybody is in agreement. What we do not agree with, however, is the way that it is proposed in the bill and the Act. First problem is the costing premise. And I think the way I explained it last year was you cannot walk into a Porsche dealership and be looking at purchasing an expensive vehicle, which is what this is. Healthcare is a very, very expensive entity, item, if you will, but you effectively have the budget for a second-hand car. You should be looking elsewhere. Maybe another explanation is if NHI projected costs coming out of the private sector equates to 50 billion rand, and you use 25 billion rand as a premise for your projections moving forward, then clearly there are some problems, okay? But even if the cost premise was accurate, everybody knows that we do not have money. There is absolutely zero money available over and above is currently being spent on public health in the coffers. This point has been made regularly over and over, almost ad nauseum, and the response is quite simply this. Well, we will impose new payroll taxes. We will increase personal tax brackets. We will use tax credits, take them away effectively. For people that pay for a medical aid, get tax credits. So the government are saying they will take that away. And then lastly, they are fairly certain that people will donate. So I'm not sure about you, but at this point, I do not have a strong inclination towards maybe donating any of my after-tax money towards NHI. So just touching on some of those issues. So payroll tax will just simply result in more people getting laid off, right? Income bracket tax, as we already know, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, our tax base is narrowing. And people that are paying taxes are also the people who can immigrate and are immigrating. All right, so that's the second point. The third point is the manner in which payments will take place. The proposal is that all these funds will be managed at one single point, which is the Minister of Health, and will be then dispersed from there. Now, again, a reality is that we all know our government's track record with regards to keeping budget, spending, improper spending, tenders, etc., is not great. So now we are talking about a fund, just to place it into context, that will be 10 to 12 times bigger than the biggest medical fund we have in South Africa. Maybe 15 times bigger, under the management of one office. Guys, that's a train heading towards a disaster. Okay, moving along. Talk about COVID-19. I have already said that understanding the impact of COVID-19 is very challenging, to say the least. And I share what we have learned, and I'm going to employ an example of an actuarial model to assist me in covering this issue. Firstly, nobody, absolutely nobody in healthcare funding arena saw this coming. And of course it goes without saying that nobody made financial provision for the claims associated with costs. We know that this novel virus, I've touched on that, originated in Wuhan, China. We know that it spreads very quickly and very easily. It has zero respect for gender, age, or any other demographics for that matter. We know that it has an incubation period of between 2 and 14 days. It's difficult to identify as it manifests differently. There are what we call super spreaders by way of asymptomatic patients, and in other words, they have contracted the virus but display absolutely zero symptoms. It attacks the respiratory system and it presents in a range of different symptoms to zero symptoms at all. The list of vulnerables include the aged, about 55 years of age and older, and obviously younger people with comorbidities. The recovery data seems strange, as we have seen, as an example, 28-year-olds and even younger succumb to this virus, and 80-year-olds are recovering, surviving. Early reports of survivors carrying lasting damage, talking about lung scarring. The recovery rate globally, as at the 1st of August, is at 80%. However, there are many scientists in the South African community that are questioning the veracity of the statistics that are being released by the South African government. We know that the impact globally will be far-reaching and economically speaking, and it will last for many, many years to come. We know that economies were shut down worldwide for months, and this could also be recurring as we see second and third waves flame up. And over and above the health risk involved or associated with COVID-19, the first evident issue is unemployment. Income to debt ratio has increased and is currently, at least in South Africa and on the African continent, inhabiting the danger zone. We have seen during this time increased criminal activity, civil servants and COVIDpreneurs displaying zero scruples, a fragile and grossly mismanaged public health service is exposed, public health shortcomings bleeding over into the private sector. So that is what we have learned at this stage. I'm going to attempt to explain the cost impact by way of an actuarial model. So every fund in South Africa have benefit review meetings which start around March and April and should be finalized by August, as they need to be presented to the council for approval around about September, and then obviously the respective launches that follow. And again, I said this previously, but nobody took the probability of a global pandemic into account. So subsequently, zero provisions were made for the cost related to COVID-19. I hear many an actuary saying reserves are exactly for times and events like these. All right, so the premise for calculating contribution increases always starts with the current year, right? In other words, if a product costs 1,000 Rand, I'm just using a number by way of an explanation, the first thing we do is we consider the current year's projected operating profit or loss. So maybe we said we would pay out claims to the value of 100 million in 2019. Most projections are saying that we will be running over that. Let's call it by 15%. So 115 million Rand will be paid out in 2019. So clearly we did not make provision for the extra 15 million Rand, and that is then obviously paid out of reserves. Fine, you need to remedy that. Then we add a percentage based on CPI, which is basically inflation. And I've had a look at the respective projections from banks, from the government, etc. And the common thought is that we'll probably land on a CPI of around 4%, maybe just under and maybe just over. So that's what you add. You add 4%. Then you need to add a percentage for service provider tariff increase, right? Because the hospitals and the doctors, also consumers, so they are saying, but we need to increase our tariffs, right? Normally between 4 and 6%. Then you need to enhance your Rand-based benefits. Explain it this way. Let's say, for argument's sake, you offer 1,000 Rand for a specific benefit on a specific option, right? So obviously next year you can buy less due to CPI with your 1,000 Rand that you could in 2019. So we need to increase that accordingly. Whenever you add any new additional benefit or program, it costs money, right? So the question begs asking, do we at this point in time add anything new? Is the appetite and the market segment we serve for additional benefits at an additional cost? What does that look like? And the shortfall between contribution and claims, as I've said earlier, which I believe most schemes will find themselves in this position this year, will be paid out of reserves. So I'm predicting that very few schemes, if any, will be making any operating profit this year. If they do, it means that they might not be paying claims according to their scheme rules. All right, so I'm going to give you maybe one or two scenarios in terms of the way forward for schemes. So schemes that have strong reserves, so as an example, let's say your calculations with regards to what your contribution increases should be for the ensuing year lands on between 12 and 15%. I know, painful. What you could do is the scheme could impose a lesser percentage increase, say 7.5, again, depending on what the fund managers and the board of trustees believe your specific market segment can pallet. And then the difference between 7.5% or 8, whatever it is, and 15% will effectively be paid out of reserves. So schemes reserves that, as I said, schemes that have strong reserves can afford to do this and give away some of those reserves, maybe 5 or 7%. And then in 2022, embark on a reserve recovery strategy for at the least 5 years, 5 to 7 years probably, and over and above your stock standard increases for the next 7 years, add another 1.2, 1.5% to get your reserves back to where they should be. And then attempt to maintain your membership and even hope for small margins of growth. Schemes that do not have strong reserves, the calculations will still land on between 12 and 15%. They would typically impose a higher increase than schemes that do have strong reserves, but still lower than what the calculations land at, so maybe a 10% contribution increase, and then pay the rest out of reserves, which could possibly result that a number of schemes dip below the statutory requirements of 25%, and then obviously embark on a reserve recovery strategy in 2022 for the next 5 to 7 years. Let's talk about the actual costs. So COVID testing, depending on the arrangement you have with service providers, range between 850 Rand and 1,200 Rand a shot. Challenge is some frontline workers that are exposed, work in that environment on a daily basis, need to be tested regularly. And also the delay in getting the test results is exacerbating this problem and causing extra costs. In most cases, positive cases, people recover at home, antibiotics. Some will end up in hospital, treated and discharged, and a small percentage will end up in ICU and will need the assistance of a ventilator. The other issue is deferred costs as a result of procedures that were supposed to take place that do not, because people are afraid. People are afraid to go into hospital. Rightly so, justifiably so. So what happens is their health situation worsens. As an example, maybe you needed a stent, you did not go in. Now you don't need a stent, you need a more serious procedure. Complications set in, and this costs the scheme much, much more. And of course, another factor impacts calculating the cost of COVID is the lockdown thing. People losing their jobs, loss of income or just partial income, and that leads to people simply cancelling their policies, which is problematic, not just for us obviously, but for people walking around in South Africa that don't have cover. So the actual costs, we don't know. Millions, hundreds of millions probably that were not provided for. All right, so I suppose the $10 billion question is, when does this end? Well, the short answer is when COVID-19 can no longer infect anybody on this planet. And it's not as simple as just a vaccine, because we have repeatedly, regularly on global news networks seen more and more people, anti-vaxxers, saying that they will not take a vaccine. So we are not out of the woods quite yet, guys. Silver linings, are there any? Well, remind me of something that my dad used to say, this too, my son, shall pass. Above all else, I believe in the resilient and strong nature of the human spirit and the inherent good that sits in our hearts. Some folk just need to dig a bit to find it. By the way, there is no entry exam or fee or eligibility criteria to join the Good Deeds Club. Just a choice, just a decision. I've personally found that when I'm about helping other people deal with their challenges, my own become insignificant very, very quickly. I heard from a reliable source that presentations are also supposed to be interesting and informative. So I found this piece of trivia very interesting and very informative. Around 500 years ago, there was a text in an unknown language and unknown writing system by an unknown author. The name of the manuscript was given in honor of Wilfrid Voynich, a Lithuanian bibliophile who bought the manuscript in 1912 in Italy. It is believed that the text might have been written in northern Italy, but that is still speculation, and that's basically all that's known about the text. Many cryptographers and code breakers from World War I and World War II worked on the manuscript, but nobody managed to find out what historical facts the text holds. You might think it could have been a joke written by someone on purpose, but there is 272 pages of it. That would call for some hardcore commitment. Recently, there has been a theory that the manuscript is a medical book dedicated to women's health, but the theory was also debunked. So, there you have my piece of interesting and informative information. I told you earlier that we'd get to a point where I would show you how clever we all are at Profmed Medical Scheme. So hopefully I've earned the right. So the next couple of slides will talk about what 2021 will look like for Profmed.
Architecture is an intimate connection between what we make and who we are. It's a way to reframe and reinterpret how connected we are to the things we build, the city and the people, the past and the future. Meet Catherine Dura, architect and graduate professional. Profmed understands that it's the space between hard work and achievement that defines who you are. Profmed, intelligent medical aid for postgraduates.
So the next slide shows Profmed's membership growth as opposed to membership growth in South Africa. You can clearly see the statistics reflected by the Council of Medical Schemes shows that membership growth in South Africa is at a decline, and at Profmed we have been able to maintain positive growth every single year since inception. So I imagine that as reflective of we are doing a couple of things right. Okay, some not negotiables, principles that we live by at Profmed. We are not negotiable on corporate governance. We have been working very hard to find the balance between benefits and contributions, which have resulted in healthy reserves. Our benefits have been exclusively designed from day one for the graduate professional. We have negotiated a large selection of network hospitals for you to choose from through our Savvy options. We have very strong provider networks in place, which again speak to discounts, which we pass on by way of contributions, unlimited hospitalization, no co-payments or admissions payable when you are admitted to hospital. We pay for contraceptives on all options, paid out of risk. As you well know, those of you who have had children recently, we offer rich maternity benefits. We cover leisure and adventure sports, rich oncology benefits, more options. And maybe just a note that Profmed is probably one of maybe a handful of schemes that are prepared to pay for biologicals, for oncology, which is far more expensive than the chemical drugs, far more effective, and that's why we pay for them. International travel, emergency and medical assistance, and obviously we offer cover across the SADC regions as well for all our members. A number of years ago, we introduced a very successful Profmed Baby program via the Profmed app, which, by the way, have won numerous awards. You get access to ER locator and your electronic membership card. We offer wellness and rewards programs, a sabbatical benefit for our members who study overseas to come back. And in 2019, obviously, we introduced you to the Savvy range of options. Talking about Savvy very quickly, it's still new to the market. For each option, we have an affordable alternative. We continue to negotiate healthy levels of discount with our service providers. So Medical Schemes Act makes provisions for efficiency discount options. You as a healthcare funder are able to negotiate discounts with a service provider or a group of service providers. Said discounts can be passed directly to your members by way of a contribution increase. That is exactly what we've done. And from the membership growth and our savvy options, it is evident that it has been extremely well received. And it continues to be far more affordable and competitive than any of our competitors. Making financial decisions that affect you and your family should not be taken flippantly and can also be cumbersome, as there are many offerings out there. I always look at the track record, the business structure of the entity. Everybody that is employed by Profmed works for the trust. We do not have a closed corporation or a PTY running alongside making profits. Every single decision we make is in service of our current and future members, and in service of the right to be around in 5, 10, and 20 years from now. It's never about profit. It's always been about the people that we serve. Guys, it is evident that we are facing a myriad of challenges, some that don't even have names yet. However, as I consider the world that I live in, as one does from time to time, I determine my mind and my heart to find even the slightest sliver of light. I have never been unsuccessful in this endeavor. I find this journey continuously returning to the resilience and vigor of the human spirit. I'd like to conclude with the writings of Michael Josephson. But before I do, a parting shot, if you will, from yours truly. Transgressions are perpetrated twice when the honest person does not confront the injustice and play an active part in bringing the perpetrator to account. So I honestly believe it is time for a revolution in South Africa. No guns, no aggression, no violence, no petty bickering, no divisiveness. Very important, no tribalism. Good, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens across the tribal scope are being held hostage by a small group, 2.5% of our population, of incompetent, immoral, unscrupulous, self-serving, greedy individuals. And the time has come, maybe a while ago, we just did not respond courageously for fear of being victimized. But the time has come to unite the citizens of our great nation and become courageous, become active voices calling for veracity. No, demanding veracity. Become uncompromising behaviorists and hold our leaders accountable. It is evident from report after report, month after month, going back many, many years, bringing to light corruption, looting. The current batch of so-called civil servants either do not have the appetite, desire, or ability to self-correct. Government simply releasing another statement expressing their embarrassment and undertaking to eradicate corruption with zero tolerance, as they have been doing for many years with zero arrests and no money is recovered, while the tax burden on the 3 million souls that do pay taxes increases exponentially. Releasing another ludicrous statement no longer works. If we as citizens continue to tolerate these transgressions, we are transgressing ourselves and quietly endorsing this psychopathic behavior. I say, guys, no more. All right, look after yourselves until we meet again. Thank you for joining me this morning. And I depart, as promised, with the words of Michael Josephson. A missive titled, What Will Matter? What will matter? Ready or not, someday it will all come to an end. There will be no more sunrises, no minutes, hours, or days. All the things you collected, whether treasured or forgotten, will pass to someone else. Your wealth, fame, and temporal power will shrivel to irrelevance. It will not matter what you owned or what you were owed. Your grudges, resentments, frustrations, and jealousies will finally disappear. so too your hopes, ambitions, plans and to-do lists will expire. The wins and losses that once seemed so important will fade away. It won't matter where you came from or what side of the tracks you lived on at the end. It won't matter whether you were beautiful or brilliant. Even your gender and skin color will be irrelevant. So what will matter? How will the value of your days be measured? What will matter is not what you bought, but what you built. Not what you got, but what you gave. What will matter is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is not what you learned, but what you taught. What will matter is every act of integrity, compassion, courage, or sacrifice that enriched, empowered, or encouraged others to emulate your example. What will matter is not your competence, but your character. What will matter is not how many people you knew, but how many will feel a lasting loss when you are gone. What will matter is not your memories, but the memories of those who loved you. What will matter is how long you will be remembered, by whom and for what. Living a life that matters doesn't happen by accident. It's not a matter of circumstance. It's a matter of choice. Choose to live a life that matters.